The night was quiet. Only the sound of cold rain falling on the metal roof broke the silence. John sat alone inside his small house, a cup of tea in his hand. He had lived on this colony world for 3 years, away from Earth, away from people. Loneliness had become his companion. He had no family, no friends, only the sound of the storm outside to remind him that he was still alive. But that night was different. A sudden knock came at his door. It was not gentle. It was urgent. John froze. Nobody visited him here. His house was far from the colony town, hidden at the edge of the forest. Who could be knocking at this hour in the middle of a storm? The knock came again, harder this time. John stood up slowly, his mind filled with questions. Was it a thief? A lost traveler? Or something worse, one of the alien creatures that sometimes wandered too close? He walked to the door carefully, his hand resting on the old rifle that leaned against the wall. His heart beat faster. "Who is there?" he called out. For a moment there was silence. Then a voice, soft but desperate, came through the door. "Please help us." It was a woman's voice. Not human. John could hear the strange accent, the soft echo of alien speech. His hand tightened on the rifle. He opened the door a little, and there they were. A woman stood in the rain, her clothes torn and soaked. Her skin was pale blue, shining faintly under the lightning. In her arms she held a small boy, no more than 6 years old. The child's eyes glowed softly in the dark, wide with fear. Both of them were shivering. The woman lowered her head. "Please, just for one night, shelter, food. My son is cold. We have nowhere else to go." John looked at them. He had seen alien traders before, even worked with some, but never like this. This was not business. This was survival. The boy's small fingers clutched at his mother's arm, and when he saw John, he hid his face in her shoulder. For a moment, John thought of closing the door. He had his own problems. Helping strangers could bring danger. But then he saw the child's bare feet, red from the cold ground. Something in John's heart shifted. "Come in," he said quietly. The woman's eyes widened in surprise, then filled with relief. She stepped inside quickly, her son clinging to her. John closed the door and locked it behind them. The warmth of the small fire in the room touched their frozen skin. The boy looked around with cautious eyes. He seemed curious but afraid, like a small animal unsure if it was safe. John brought out a blanket and handed it to them. The woman wrapped her son carefully, rubbing his small arms to bring back warmth. "Sit," John said, pointing to the chair near the fire. They obeyed without a word. For a while, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and the storm outside. John poured some tea into a cup and pushed it towards her. "Drink." The woman hesitated, then took it with both hands. "Thank you." Her voice was trembling, almost breaking. The boy peeked out from the blanket, his glowing eyes staring at John. There was no hate in those eyes, only fear and hunger. John felt the weight of his gaze. "You can stay for one night," John said finally. "But tomorrow you must leave." "I don't want trouble." The woman nodded quickly. "Yes, one night is all we ask." But deep inside, John knew things were never that simple. The woman looked down at her son, then at John. "My name is Lyra. This is my son, Kyle." John gave a small nod. "I'm John." Lyra's hands shook as she held the cup. She looked like she had not slept in days. Her clothes were dirty, torn as if she had been running for a long time. John wanted to ask questions, but he stayed silent. He knew when someone carried a story too heavy to speak. The boy, Kale, suddenly spoke, his voice small and clear. "Are we safe here?" John looked at him. The question pierced straight into his heart. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to promise safety, but he could not lie. "For tonight," John said slowly, "you are safe." The boy leaned against his mother, finally closing his eyes. Within minutes he was asleep, but Lyra did not sleep. Her eyes kept moving to the door, to the window, as if she expected something or someone to come. John noticed it. "Who is after you?" he asked. She froze. Her lips parted, but no words came. Finally, she whispered, "People you don't want to know." John sighed. Trouble had already entered his home. He could feel it in his bones. Outside, the storm grew stronger. The wind howled like a beast and the forest groaned under the weight of the rain. But inside the small house, something new had begun. A man who had lived alone for years now shared his fire with strangers. A mother who had lost all hope now found a fragile light. And a small boy, who had asked for safety, had closed his eyes in peace for the first time in many nights. John sat quietly, staring into the fire. He did not know why he let them in. Maybe it was the boy's eyes. Maybe it was his own loneliness. But one thing was clear. This was not just one night. This was the beginning of something that would change his life forever. The rain had stopped by morning. The sun rose weakly over the forest, light dripping through the wet leaves. John stood at the window, staring at the mist outside. He told himself it was only one night. The woman and her boy would leave today and things would return to normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Behind him, he heard small footsteps. The boy, Cale, was awake. His glowing eyes looked brighter in the daylight. He rubbed his eyes with tiny fists and then sat quietly on the floor, watching the fire burn low. John turned. "Your mother still asleep?" Kyle nodded. His voice was soft. She was very tired. John said nothing, but his heart felt heavy. He boiled some water, made a simple breakfast, and placed a plate on the table. The boy stared at the food, hesitant, then slowly reached out. "Go on," John said. "Eat." Cale's small hands moved fast after the first bite. Hunger had no manners. He ate quickly, like he had not seen proper food in many days. John looked at him, remembering his own childhood. He too had once eaten like that, after long days when there was nothing on the table. A sound came from the other room. Lyra walked in, her face pale but calmer than last night. She bowed her head slightly. "Thank you for letting us stay." John crossed his arms. "You should leave before noon. The colony patrol sometimes comes near this road. If they see you here, they will ask questions." Lyra's expression darkened. "The patrol is not our worry. It is the men who follow," John frowned. "The ones you ran from?" She did not answer directly, only pulled her son closer. "They always find us," her words left a shadow in the room. John wanted to press her for details, but something in her eyes stopped him. She was carrying a pain too deep to share with a stranger. After breakfast, John stepped outside to chop firewood. The forest smelled of wet soil. Birds sang, but their sound felt fragile, like it could break at any moment. As he lifted the axe, he noticed something on the ground near the fence. A set of footprints, fresh, not his, not theirs. John's chest tightened. Someone had been near the house during the night, watching. He returned quickly, trying not to alarm them. Lyra was folding the blanket, Cale chasing a wooden cup across the floor like a toy. John spoke carefully. "You can't leave today." Lyra looked up in shock. "What?" Someone was outside last night. "They know you came here." Fear crossed her face. She grabbed her son's arm tightly. "I told you." "They never stop." John clenched his jaw. He was only one man. He had no reason to risk his life for strangers. And yet the idea of sending them out to danger felt impossible. "You'll stay one more night," John said firmly. "I'll keep watch." Lyra's lips trembled. She wanted to argue, but her eyes softened. "Why are you helping us?" John hesitated. He did not have an answer. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the boy's question from last night. "Are we safe here?" "Because you knocked on my door," he said finally. That night, John prepared. He checked his rifle, sharpened his old combat knife, and set traps around the edge of the clearing. The boy watched him with wide eyes. "Are bad men coming?" Cale asked. John knelt in front of him. "Maybe, but I'll keep you safe." Cale's small face brightened. For a child who had lost trust in the world, even those simple words were powerful. He hugged John suddenly, wrapping his little arms around his neck. John froze, unused to such closeness, but slowly he placed a hand on the boy's back. Lyra stood at the doorway, watching silently. Her expression was unreadable, but for the first time her eyes carried something other than fear. That night the storm returned. Rain beat against the windows and wind howled through the trees. John stayed awake, sitting near the door with his rifle across his knees. Every creak, every gust of wind made his muscles tighten. Lyra lay on the floor near the fire, her son sleeping beside her. She whispered into the dark, "If they come, they will not stop until you are dead too." John did not turn his head. His eyes stayed on the window. Then let them try. Hours passed. The forest was alive with sound. Branches cracked. Once John thought he saw shadows moving beyond the trees, but no one came close. Still, he knew this was not over. As dawn broke, the house still stood. The boy woke and ran to John, smiling as if nothing had happened. For him, survival was enough reason to smile. John, however, felt the weight of a choice he had not expected to make. One night had turned into two, and deep inside he knew it would not end there. For the first time in years, John's house was not empty. The fire had warmth, the air had voices. But with that warmth came danger, and with that danger came a question John could not escape. Had he saved them, or had he doomed himself? The second night passed, but John could not sleep. He sat near the window, his eyes scanning the dark forest again and again. He told himself it was foolish. Maybe the footprints he had seen were old, maybe no one was following them, but in his heart, he knew. The woman was hiding something. Something dangerous. Morning light spilled into the small house. Lyra moved quietly, preparing a simple meal with what little John had. Kyle played with a wooden spoon, tapping it against the floor. For the first time, the house was filled with small sounds of life, sounds John had not heard in years. And yet, unease sat heavy in his chest. Finally, John spoke. "You can't stay here forever. If someone is hunting you, I need to know why. I need the truth." Lyra froze. Her hands trembled around the pot. She lowered her head. "I told you we are running." "That's not enough," John said, his voice firm. "I need to know from who and why." Kale stopped tapping the spoon. His glowing eyes looked between them, sensing the tension. Lyra sat down slowly, her shoulders heavy as if carrying a weight too large. For a long time she stayed silent. Then in a voice low and broken she began. "We belong to them," she said. John frowned. "Them?" "The syndicate," she whispered, as if even saying the name was dangerous. "Raiders, slavers. They own half the colonies in this sector. They buy, they sell, they break. My people, we were nothing but property to them." Her words cut the air. John's fists clenched unconsciously. He had heard of the syndicate before during his time in the colonies. They were ruthless. They left no survivors. "I was taken when I was young," Lyra continued. "Kale was born in their camps. His father—" Her voice broke and she shook her head, refusing to finish. "We escaped when a fight broke out between their warlords. It was the only chance. We ran. For months we have run." Her hands gripped the edge of the table, but they never stopped chasing. A mother and child, easy prey. "They always find us again." John sat in silence. He had seen cruelty before. He had fought wars. But the thought of a child growing up in chains twisted something deep inside him. Kale looked at his mother and then at John. "Are they coming here too?" he asked softly. Lyra pulled him close. "No, Kale, not here," but her eyes betrayed her. She did not believe her own words. John stood and walked to the window. His voice was calm, but inside he was burning. "If they find this place, they won't just take you back. They'll burn everything, kill everyone, including me." Lyra lowered her head in shame. "That is why we should go. You have already given us too much. If we stay, you will die because of us." John turned, his jaw set. "If you leave, you'll die anyway." Silence filled the room. Lyra's eyes widened at his blunt words. She wanted to argue, but deep down she knew he was right. Kale suddenly walked toward John, his small steps uncertain. He looked up, his glowing eyes filled with both fear and trust. "Will you protect us?" John's breath caught. The boy's voice was so innocent, yet the question carried the weight of everything Lyra had not dared to ask. He crouched down so his eyes met the boy's. "I'll try," he said softly. "As long as you're under my roof, I'll try." Kale smiled faintly and hugged him again, the same way he had the night before. The warmth of that small body against his chest stirred something long buried inside John, a feeling he had almost forgotten. Family. That night, as the fire burned low, Lyra spoke again. Her voice was quiet, but this time steady. "You are not like other humans. Most would have turned us away. Some would have sold us back to the syndicate for a few credits." John stared into the fire. "I'm no hero. I'm just a man who opened a door. But you opened it when no one else would," Lyra whispered. Outside, the forest was silent. Too silent. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped. John's eyes narrowed. He picked up his rifle, his instincts sharp. "They're close." Lyra's hand flew to Kale, pulling him near. Her face went pale. "Pack your things," John said, his voice low but commanding. If they come tonight, this house will be a battlefield. Kyle clung to his mother, eyes wide with fear. Lyra's lips moved silently as if in prayer, and John, the man who had lived alone for so long, felt a fire in his chest. He was not just protecting strangers anymore. He was protecting something that finally gave meaning to his life. The shadows of the past were coming. But this time he would not run. This time he would fight. The night was darker than usual. Clouds covered the moon, and the forest outside John's home was still, too still. The silence pressed against the walls like a weight. John sat near the door with his rifle, his ears sharp to every sound. Inside, Lyra kept Kale close, whispering soft words to calm him. But her own eyes were restless. She knew what was coming. She had felt it too many times before, the quiet before hunters arrived. John's voice was low, steady. "When I say hide, you take Kale into the back room and don't come out until I call." Lyra nodded. Her lips were pale. "And you?" "I'll deal with them," John said simply. Suddenly the sound came. A distant crunch of footsteps on wet leaves. Then another, then more. Shapes moved between the trees, too many to count. John's grip tightened on the rifle. His heart was calm, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he had lived with danger before. He knew fear well, and he had learned to move through it. The first shadow broke from the trees. A syndicate raider, tall, armored, carrying a jagged blade that glimmered in the dark. Behind him came two more, then five, their alien eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. They stopped at the edge of the clearing. The leader raised his voice. "Human, we know what you hide. Give them to us, and we will let you live." Lyra's breath caught. Kale buried his face in her arms. John stepped forward, rifle in his hands, his voice strong. "You'll find nothing here." The leader laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Do not play games. The woman and her brat belong to us. They are syndicate property." John's jaw tightened. "Not anymore." The raider tilted his head, amused. "One human standing against us? Do you think your bones are stronger than steel?" John did not answer with words. He lifted his rifle and fired. The crack of the shot split the night. One raider fell, his body crashing into the mud. The others roared in rage. The attack began. They rushed forward, weapons raised. John fired again, the flash of light breaking through the dark. Another raider fell. But there were too many. They spread out, circling the small house. "Hide!" John shouted. Lyra grabbed Kale and pulled him into the back room, slamming the wooden door shut behind them. The boy clung to her, trembling, his small voice whispering, "Will he win, Mama? Will he win?" Outside, John moved fast. He ducked behind the fence as a blade sliced through the air where his head had been. He swung his rifle like a club, smashing it into a raider's face. The alien screamed, stumbling back. John rolled, pulling his combat knife free. One raider lunged. John sidestepped and drove the knife deep into the creature's side. The enemy fell with a cry, but another came right after, swinging heavy metal claws. The impact threw John to the ground. His breath rushed out, his ribs burning. But he pushed himself up, rage boiling in his chest. He fought like a cornered wolf, fast, ruthless, and unafraid of blood. Every strike was precise, every move filled with the desperate strength of a man who had nothing to lose. Inside the house, Lyra covered Kale's ears, trying to shield him from the shouts, the gunfire, the screams. Tears ran down her face as she whispered, "Hold on, please hold on." Outside, the fight raged. John's arms burned, his body bruised, but he did not stop. He fired until his rifle clicked empty, then used it as a weapon of steel and wood. He stabbed, he struck, he broke bones. At last, silence fell. The clearing was littered with broken bodies. Smoke rose from the edge of the forest where one raider's weapon had burned into the trees. John stood in the mud, chest heaving, blood running down his arm from a deep cut. But he was alive, and they were not. Slowly, he turned back to the house. He opened the door, and there she was, Lyra, her face white with fear, holding her son tightly. Kale ran to him first, small arms wrapping around his legs. "You came back," the boy cried. John dropped his rifle, his hand resting gently on the child's head. His voice was rough but steady. "I told you. You're safe here." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She had seen humans before. Many had been cruel, selfish, cold. But this man, he had stood against death itself for her and her child. "You fought them alone," she whispered. John shook his head. "No, I fought for you. That's different." The storm outside had passed, but inside a new storm had begun. Because both Lyra and John knew this was only the first wave. The syndicate would come again, and next time, they would not underestimate the human. The forest was silent the next morning. Not a bird sang, not a leaf moved. The ground outside John's house was still scarred from the night's battle. Mud was mixed with blood, broken weapons scattered across the clearing. The stench of death lingered in the air. John stood at the doorway, staring at the aftermath. His muscles ached, his wounds burned, but his mind was steady. He had survived. They had survived. Behind him, Kyle peeked out from the corner. His glowing eyes widened at the sight of the fallen raiders. The boy pressed himself closer to the doorframe, holding his mother's hand. "Don't look," Lyra whispered, pulling him back, but it was too late. The image was already burned into the boy's memory. John finally turned to them. "It's over. For now." He picked up the broken pieces of wood from his shattered fence, his movements slow but determined. The house that had once been silent now carried new weight. It had become a place of war. But John refused to let it remain broken. "Come," he said, nodding to Lyra. "We rebuild." Lyra looked at him in surprise. "After what happened, you still want to stay here?" John gave a small, tired smile. "Running doesn't suit me, besides. They'll come again whether I stay or not, so we make this place strong." All that day they worked together. John repaired the fence with stronger wood. Lyra cleaned the bloodstains with quiet determination, her hands steady though her heart was heavy. Cale carried small stones and placed them carefully near the fire, proud to help in his own small way. The rhythm of building gave the house a new kind of life. The cracks in the walls were patched, the broken door reinforced. The clearing, once only John's lonely space, now echoed with voices, soft, gentle, alive. At sunset they sat together near the fire. Cale leaned against John's arm, half asleep, while Lyra stitched a tear in John's sleeve with fine, careful hands. "You fight like a soldier," she said quietly. John stared at the flames. "I was one, long ago, and now you live alone," he nodded. "Some battles follow you even after you leave the field." Lyra studied him. There was pain in his words, but also a strange strength. She had met many humans in her life, but none like this one. Cale's small voice broke the silence. "When I grow up, I want to fight like you." John looked down at the boy. "No," he said softly. "When you grow up, I want you to live without fighting." The boy frowned, confused. "But you fight." John placed a hand on his head. "Because someone has to." "So you don't have to." The words lingered in the air, heavy and true. That night the house felt different, not empty, not lonely. It felt like home. But peace never lasted long in a world shadowed by the syndicate. As the fire dimmed, a sharp crack echoed in the distance. Not thunder, not the wind. It was the sound of something breaking, metal against stone. John's head snapped up. He moved to the window, his hand instinctively reaching for the rifle. Far in the distance, lights flickered between the trees. Not the soft glow of stars. The hard burning glare of engines. Lyra saw it too. Her face went pale. "They're searching." John's jaw clenched. The syndicate was not finished. Last night's attack had only been the beginning. But then something strange happened. Kyle stood by the window, his eyes glowing brighter than ever before. He pressed his small hands against the glass, whispering words in his own alien tongue. The firelight caught his face, and for a moment John saw something he had not noticed before. The boy's glow was not just natural. It pulsed, like a signal. Lyra noticed John staring. Her voice was tight, urgent. "Do not look at him like that. Cale is not a weapon." John turned slowly. "Then why does the syndicate chase you? Why risk so much for one mother and child?" Her lips trembled, but she did not answer. Instead, she pulled Cale away from the window, wrapping him in her arms. John said nothing more. But the thought gnawed at him. This was not just about slavery. The boy was special. The syndicate wanted him for a reason. As the night deepened, the sound of engines faded back into silence. But John knew the reprieve was temporary. They would come again. In greater numbers, with greater fury, and when they did, this home, rebuilt with sweat, blood, and fragile hope, would either stand as a fortress or burn as a grave. John sat awake long after the others had fallen asleep. His body ached, but his eyes stayed sharp, watching the horizon. For the first time in years, he had something worth fighting for. Something worth dying for, and he would not let the shadows take it away. The third night was colder. The air outside carried a strange heaviness, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. John could feel it in his bones. The syndicate was near. Not just scouts this time. An army. He moved through the small house like a shadow, checking his weapons again and again. The rifle was cleaned, the knife sharpened, the traps reset. Every sound outside made his heartbeat louder, but his hand stayed steady. Lyra watched him silently from the corner. Cale sat in her lap, half asleep, but his glowing eyes flickered each time thunder rolled across the hills. Finally, Lyra spoke. "You cannot win this fight. They will come in numbers too great." John did not look at her. "I don't need to win. I only need to make sure they don't take you." Her voice shook. "Why? Why would you risk your life for us?" "You owe us nothing." John stopped, staring at the door. His words came slowly, heavy as stone. "Because for too long I lived as if nothing mattered. I told myself it was easier to be alone. But now?" He turned, his eyes meeting hers. "Now I see that was just another kind of death. If I stand for you, at least my life means something." Lyra's lips parted, but no words came. She lowered her gaze, holding Cale tighter. The boy stirred. His small voice cut through the silence. "You'll protect us again?" John knelt down beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'll do more than that. I'll make them afraid to ever come here again." The boy's eyes glowed brighter, reflecting the firelight. "Then I'll help too." John smiled faintly. "Not yet, little one. Tonight you let me fight." Outside, the first sign came. A low hum. Engines in the distance. The glow of lights between the trees grew stronger, brighter, closer. John's chest tightened. He turned to Lyra. "Take Cale to the back room. When the shooting starts, do not move until it's over. Do you understand?" She nodded, her hands trembling. "And you?" He checked the last strap on his gear. His voice was steady like steel. "I'll be at the door." Moments later, the clearing filled with syndicate forces. Dozens of armored raiders, their weapons shining under the false light of their torches. They spread like a tide, surrounding the small wooden house. The leader stepped forward, his armor darker and heavier than the rest. His voice carried across the clearing. "Human, you think yourself strong. You killed our scouts, our hunters. But tonight you die, and the child will be ours." John stood in the doorway, rifle across his chest. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with fire. "You want him?" he shouted. "Then you'll have to walk through me." Laughter erupted among the raiders. The leader raised his hand. "Very well. Kill him." The attack began. Gunfire exploded, shattering the night. Bullets tore into the walls, splinters flying like arrows. John fired back, each shot precise, dropping the first wave before they reached the fence. But more came. Always more. He moved like a machine, ducking, firing, reloading, shifting positions. Every move was survival, every breath a battle. The syndicate closed in, their shouts echoing, their weapons flashing. Inside, Kyle pressed his face into his mother's chest, his small hands gripping her clothes. Lyra closed her eyes, whispering prayers, but tears slipped down her face. Outside, John's fight became brutal. His rifle ran empty. He swung it like a club, smashing skulls, breaking armor. His knife cut through the air, quick and merciless. Blood splattered across his face, his arms, his clothes. Still they came. One raider's blade slashed across his side. Pain seared his body, but John did not fall. He roared, driving the knife into the attacker's throat, dragging the body down with him. He pushed himself up, gasping, his vision swimming. The house loomed behind him, fragile, small, but it was home. It was theirs, and he would not let it burn. The leader stepped forward now, raising his heavy weapon. "You are strong, human. Stronger than most. But even wolves die when the pack is large enough." John raised his bloody knife, his chest heaving. "Then come see how a wolf dies," the leader charged. Their weapons clashed, steel against steel, sparks flying into the night. John fought with every ounce of strength left in him, his body screaming with pain but his spirit unbroken. Inside the house, Cale's glow pulsed again. Brighter, stronger, almost alive. Lyra looked at her son in shock. She realized the truth she had hidden for so long. The boy was not ordinary. His light was something the syndicate wanted, something that could change everything. And John, without even knowing it, was fighting to protect more than just a child. He was fighting to protect a future. The battle raged on, blood, fire, steel, a human standing alone against the tide. And though the night was thick with death, one thing became clear to every raider who faced him. This was no ordinary man, this was a human, and a human who stands is never easy to break. The night was fire and thunder. The syndicate raiders pressed harder, their shouts echoing through the forest. The small wooden house shook with each explosion, but still John stood in the clearing, bloodied yet unbroken. Every swing of his blade, every shot of his rifle carried not just survival but defiance. He was one man against many, and yet he refused to fall. The leader clashed with him again, heavy strikes that forced John to his knees. Pain seared through his ribs, his vision blurred. Still, he rose. Inside the house, Cale's glow grew brighter, filling the small room with light, soft but powerful, like a living star. Lyra gasped, holding her son close. His small hands trembled, but his eyes shone with a strength far beyond his years. "Mother," Kyle whispered, "he cannot fight alone." Before Lyra could answer, the glow surged. Light poured from the boy's skin, spilling through the cracks of the door, spreading into the clearing outside. The raiders froze, their weapons lowered as the strange radiance washed over them. John staggered, raising his head. For a moment, the pain in his body lessened. The warmth of the light filled his chest, steadying his breath, sharpening his focus. Cale stepped into the doorway, his glow illuminating the battlefield. His small voice rang out, clear and strong. "Leave us." The raiders stumbled back, fear flashing across their alien faces. The glow burned into their eyes, not with fire, but with something deeper. Hope, strength, defiance. They felt what humans had always carried in their hearts, and it terrified them. The leader snarled, shaking his head. "The boy is ours." He lunged forward, blade raised high. John roared, meeting him in one final clash. Steel struck steel, sparks flying. But this time, John was not alone. The light of Cale burned around him, guiding his hands, steadying his strikes. With a final surge of strength, John drove his blade deep into the leader's chest. The raider staggered, choking on his last breath, before collapsing into the mud. Silence fell. The remaining syndicate raiders stared at the glowing boy, then at the bloodied human who refused to die. Fear overcame rage. One by one, they backed away, retreating into the forest. Their shadows melted into the trees, until only the night remained. John dropped his weapon, his chest heaving. His body was broken, bleeding, but he was alive. Somehow, against the impossible, he had stood his ground. Cale ran forward, throwing his small arms around John's waist. "You did it!" he cried. John knelt slowly, wincing at the pain, and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "No, Cale, we did it." Lyra came forward, her eyes filled with tears. She touched John's face gently, her voice trembling. "You should have let us go. You should have saved yourself." John shook his head. "If I had let you go, I'd still be nothing but a lonely man in an empty house. Now I have something worth fighting for." Lyra's lips trembled, but she smiled through her tears. "Then we will never leave." The words settled deep in John's heart. He had let them in for one night, but now he could not imagine his life without them. As dawn broke, the forest slowly came alive again. Birds sang, the mist lifted, and light spread across the clearing. The house still stood, scarred but unbroken, like its guardian. John, once a man forgotten, was no longer alone. Lyra, once a woman without hope, had found safety. And Cale, once a child hunted, had shown a glimpse of something greater. Together, they had faced the darkness. And together, they would face whatever came next. John stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the sunrise. For the first time in years, the world looked different, not empty, not cold. Home. He whispered the words to himself, almost afraid to believe them. Forever changed. Behind him, Cale's voice rose in laughter, Lyra's soft voice joining. The sound filled the air, stronger than the silence of the past. The galaxy would still bring battles. The syndicate would return one day. But when they did, they would not find a lonely man waiting in the dark. They would find a family, and they would learn once again why humans could never be broken.